Welcome to the Change Loves Company podcast, where I sit down with the creatives, fundraisers, social entrepreneurs, artists and activists, all with one thing in common. They're changing the world for the better through their work. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land I'm recording on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be. I'm Dominique Antarakis, and I'm delighted to introduce you to someone who probably needs no introduction, Sean Triner. Sean has never been one to wait for permission. A lifelong fundraiser, data nerd, and deadly snake rescuer, his work has helped over 100 charities in 20-plus countries embrace their innovation without losing their soul. He introduced benchmark fundraising in Australia and led breakthrough campaigns like the Soy Dog Foundation's fight against the Asian dog meat trade. His coaching empowers fundraisers to test boldly, fail fast, and recover smarter. Because, to him, waiting for the perfect policy kills progress. Sean co-founded Pareto Fundraising and Mosianic, two ventures that revolutionized how charities use data, storytelling, and now AI. Through Pareto alone, Sean helped charities raise over $1 billion for good causes across Australasia. But as Sean tells it, too many non-profit leaders are still stuck in analysis paralysis, letting fear and policy roadblocks block progress. We sat down and talked about AI and how charities should be using it not only survive, but also thrive in the coming years. So I'm delighted to welcome to the studio today, Sean Triner. Hi, Sean, and welcome to Change Loves Company.
Hi, and thanks very much for having me, Dominique.
That's my pleasure. So today we wanted to talk about all things AI, a bit of a hot topic at the moment. It sort of exploded into the consumer consciousness, 18 months ago or so, and it just seems to be absolutely ubiquitous. But you have been doing a lot in this space since it all sort of came online. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing from a personal perspective, but also when you're dealing with all your charity clients through Mosianic?
Yes, I am a bit of a nerd. In early 1980s, I was playing with my VIC-20 and Commodore 64 and everything. I've always been very much into the latest tech, and I'm using AI in many areas of my life, like many people are. And of course, I really believe that we're in the middle of an AI revolution right now. And this is, as we're recording this is kind of literally the middle. 4 or 5 years ago, there was no real consumer engagement with AIs. And I think in 4 or 5 years from now, every consumer will be interacting with AIs pretty much in some way, and every job. So I kind of think this is like it's very short industrial revolution, really. But I have jumped on the bandwagon, if you like. I was definitely early on there, but everything from my first things, I was like just writing stories for example, for my neighbor. One of their kids kept chickens. And we were by the river, and we had a whole story of the pirates coming up the river to steal the chickens and how he caught them, and did a nice illustrated story using AI. And it was his favorite birthday present, things like that. And then as I've gone on, and AIs, or large language models in particular, have become more useful. That's like your ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, those kind of things. I've started to just use them, and they're already obviously trained on everything on the internet, but I've done a lot of training not using everything on the internet. So basically just based on Mosianic courses and workshops on everything from helping assess your copy, graphic design, certainly graphic design briefs, and graphic design for an organization like Mosianic, which is pretty good because we kind of have cartoons as our things. So a lot of tools that I've built that lean on my expertise and allow people to access that on fundraising stuff. And on personal, I have one that I built, which is just all our travel quirks. I have celiac disease. So I need to be near somewhere where I can get good gluten-free food and things like that. So it takes all of that into account when I say I'm going to Amsterdam. And then it'll help find my hotel, transport to and from, all those sort of things. And it reads through all my partner's quirks. So that's pretty cool. So I have a lot of personal ones for that kind of stuff as well.
Is there anything you wouldn't use AI for? And keep it clean, Sean.
Yes. Well, that one, I wouldn't be interested in that. I think, I don't know. I mean, obviously when I'm sort of taking the dog for a walk, I take my dog for a walk, but I tend to be on the AI and having a chat and creating new content or something like that. And by new content, I might be brainstorming a new AI that we're building to, I don't know, help people with their donor webinars, to give them all of the materials and templates that they needed, for example. So what wouldn't I use it for? It's not a matter of what I wouldn't use it for, because even with major donors, the human conversations that you're having with major donors are incredibly important. And I wouldn't be wanting to replace all of those. But what I would be doing is making it much more effective, so that people come armed with the right information. It's super fast information that you can get, going and talking to people, having like this big extension to your memory of, good record keeping in the database, all that sort of stuff. So I wouldn't replace people talking to people. I think that's incredibly important, but I would increase their capacity dramatically by improving the systems to allow them to just basically see more people and do what they do brilliantly, which is closing deals, if you like, having a chat with these beautiful donors, and then not having to go away and do all of the paperwork and everything, because it's all automated from that conversation. And we found that nearly all major donors are quite happy to have that recorded and understand about the AI. So obviously there'll be some people who say, no, just do your notes and properly, like you don't do now. But, so all of those. So there are specific things that I wouldn't do, but I think it will interact with pretty much every aspect of life in the richer nations to begin with.
So obviously the time saving is one thing, as you say, taking notes for you and finding good information that you can then use in those human interactions. What are some of the areas that you're starting to see charities, maybe dip a toe in the water with AI and starting to use it in more clever ways than that?
There's quite a few. I mean, one of the ones that I love is, when you got a contract, and before you go to your lawyer, you can have a look through and get basically one of the AIs to have a look through that contract for you. That just saves you so much time, because then if you do go to your lawyer, which you probably should, generally speaking, it's just you're just on it so much faster and you can understand their language and things like that. So I love that. But the other thing I'm hoping it's really going to revolutionize, even when charity fundraisers and their peers understand that we should write kind, easy to read copy in direct mail, in our emails, grade 6 or below, reading grade 6 or below, which is not because we think people are daft. It's because it was kinder, and it's better for people whose first language isn't English. But then all their internal documentation is just horrific. It's horrible. And I really love using AI to just get rid of that jargon and really help with those sort of things. I think that's really important. Minute taking, things like that. A ton of really quick wins that save time. Once people have written these really boring policies that we have in charitable organizations that are incredibly important and we really need to do them, no one ever looks at them until 3 years later when it's due to be up. So having like all of those policies in a place, and then you're doing something and you're able to interact and say, maybe the machine is saying, check this against policy. Because it's been trained that this could have an impact. So there's some things like that can just really be incredibly helpful, and they're all really boring. And then, of course, on the less boring side, we've got them to use to help us with creativity. Anti-fan of the idea of, I use mine to get going, to give me my initial. I think that's just a really, really bad use of AIs, because you go into edit mode rather than create mode. And I think that, there's a few things like that, that you can do a lot better. But in all of those things, people talk about augmented humans, AI is augmenting humans. I actually like it the other way, that actually I create AIs that are human augmented AIs. So in other words, I've got the AI, we've created that, but it really, when they're driven by a skilled, experienced person who knows what they want, is going to have a lot better outcome. Do you know what I mean? So like if I was, for example, writing copy rather than anybody just writing copy, it would be much better if a copywriter is talking to the AI, brainstorming, having a chat, and I actually mean talking here, not even typing, and then moving on from there to actually produce that, and then to produce the copy, and the copywriter is discussing it. Go, well, come on, dude. Where's the first person singular? You've totally got this wrong, because as of our time of recording, which who knows what about next week, nearly all the LLMs are like naughty teenagers. They make stuff up. They tell fibs. Oh yeah, this is 800 words and it's not. It's actually 412, that sort of stuff. So a lot.
Yeah. So what do you see currently as its limitations? And how much do you think things are going to change in the next, as you said, sort of 5 years in terms of the tech itself?
I really do think this is a massive, massive industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it, information revolution, humankind revolution. It's like we're going through an epoch in 10 years, This is huge. And I might be wrong. And what I want to do is say, I probably am wrong. Everyone's wrong when they talk about the future. But I kind of like the idea of just thinking, what if I am wrong? Does it matter? If the things that I'm suggesting people do is not going to, it's still going to be in a better place. A bit like climate change. We're not wrong about climate change. But if we were, all the things we do to mitigate climate change are really good for the world anyway. And it's a bit like that with AI. So where are they? They're not very good when we just have unrealistic expectations of them. I mean, that's the biggest problem, when we just have these completely unrealistic expectations. Write me a 4-page letter. It's not going to work like that. And so you actually need training on using AI. It's not much. It's actually much easier to train to use LLMs than, for example, to use just 20% of Microsoft Excel's capabilities, right? Which nearly everybody never uses. With AI, you can learn pretty fast, and you can also ask them to teach you how to use them. It's kind of cool. And there's I have a lot of tips of just how to get the best out of them, which we ain't got time to go through today. But I've got a tools document, 5 essential tools for AI assisted fundraising. And there's lots and lots of tips and ways that we can get more out of them and where they're not so good.
Where could people get that document?
From me. I don't know if you can put a link up or something, but that would be cool. I'll give you a link. But yes.
We'll put a link up at the end or in the social post.
Sure. Thank you. But yeah, for some reason, mine often talk to me in Welsh. I don't speak Welsh, but it often talks to me in Welsh and thinks I'm talking Welsh. I have a lot of, there's some pretty funny things that it does as well. But the Welsh one,
it's probably some Welsh programmer having a laugh, I reckon.
Yeah, like I don't know if you remember, but in Microsoft Excel, if you press this button, this button, and this button, there was a little flight simulator built into it back on 3.1 a long time ago.
I don't use Excel.
You could be right.
Much.
Some Welsh programmer has lined that up for us.
Having a laugh. So my experience is that it's hard enough to get charities to invest in people, a decent CRM, acquisition, DM, etc. How do you get them to invest in AI?
It's really funny, isn't it? Because there's 2 obstacles, right, that charitable organizations tend to have. One is fear, mostly to do with security and donor data, and that's you should definitely be very concerned about feeding donor data into AIs. But the other one is the cost. And the cost is just, if you were paying the $25 or $30, even $50 a month for an AI, large language model paid version like ChatGPT or Claude or something, or Copilot, for $50 on an average salary, you kind of have to save about 15 minutes a month. I mean, it just pays for itself, because nearly everybody really doesn't actually value the price of people. They just, oh yes, but it'll add up another $25 per person or $50 per person. And not everybody should have the paid versions, because you're going to have different people in different things. For sure, if you're in a Microsoft environment, very generous, non-profit discount rates, and adding Copilot to that is a no-brainer. But Copilot is definitely not the best model for many of the uses that charitable fundraisers or HR or project managers actually should be using. So they all do different things. It's not like which is the best LLM. It's just not a really sensible question. They have different, and at any given time, there's different models. So I think that people should be allowed to basically experiment, and the organization should support them in paying for AIs, how do we get them to invest? It's just by that productivity. The productivity increases can be huge. Like everything, your productivity goes down at first because everybody is like writing stories to the next door neighbor's kid or whatever, and they're just learning. But then your productivity goes up. If you want, I've got a cracking example of one of those.
Yeah, go for it.
So with Motionic, I have a lot of conversations with people for the first time. And I all I need to do is just like if I say to somebody, oh yeah, do you want to meet up and we'll catch up and we use AI and recording and everything? Is that okay? But yeah, yes, I. And I just type, I am meeting Ben.Smith at, and the charity name, charity.org. whatever. And I just type that in. And I've written, people call them agent, but whatever. It's like a little GPT. I have this little tool that I just type that in. It gives me the full lowdown on their LinkedIn history. It tells me all about their organization. It gets up their financial report for me. It tells me the ratio, revenue against reserves, which is a really important factor that nearly everybody doesn't know, but it's incredibly important. It does all of these things for me. And then it says, did they give you a brief or tell you what they want to talk about? And I can tell it that. And it goes, okay. And then it creates a 30-minute agenda for me. And then at the end of that, I can put the transcription in and it will create the response and the proposal. So that's like for a small business. She's just awesome. This is just fantastic for charities, and some super, super smart charities are already on top of this, where they would have the conversation with the major donor fundraiser, and it's the same kind of thing that's happening, or with the prospect as well, using publicly available information. They'll get that, blah, 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 and be able to have these conversations and speak to people properly, again, with appropriate permissions and understanding and, of use of what we're going to do. That alone, I reckon that's going to increase the capacity for a portfolio of major donors for a major donor fundraiser by at first 10, 20%. And then as it gets better and as the transcriptions get better and the stuff that it produces afterwards, and it maps you to the right proposal or case for support, all of that kind of stuff. And that's just going to probably in a couple of years, double the capacity of any major donor fundraiser or legacy fundraiser. It's just awesome. And not only double their capacity, they're actually better. They're better informed, and they can do more conversations in one day, get the notes properly into the database because they don't do that. It's all done for them in an appropriate way. It's just fantastic.
So I'm sure in your time, Sean, you've seen a lot of messy data. Does it now mean that people are going to have to, like that initial input of, say, updating your LinkedIn profile and stuff like that, or just the data that you have, that you hold for donors or people, etc., is going to have to be cleaner to get a better output, or will AI kind of tidy it up for us as well?
Well, I imagine you could get AI to tidy up your LinkedIn profile and make it more effective if you really wanted to. So you could probably do that. I mean, I think before AI, you should be keeping data clean. One of the beautiful theoretical things about different types of AI, so those that have got security levels comparable to your database, your CRM, then you would be able to, in theory, if the data's still a mess, as long as the information's in there. And historically, major donor fundraisers and legacy fundraisers would just enter a little note in notes about a conversation that they had with the major donor. And that's pretty hard to do selections by or find that information. You would just have to open that record and read it. But now with AI, we can actually look for what anybody said in notes that are relevant to this and have that come up. So when I'm speaking to Dominique, who's a donor, as soon as I start that conversation, all that information should just come up for me automatically. Even the stuff that historically wasn't in a field, I'll know the name of your dog and your cat and things like that. So much, much better on your data. So yeah, having clean data is better for humans as well as AIs. It's just good to keep your data clean.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's just always good advice, Sean.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're clearly an enthusiast, and
Yes.
you're clearly, taking the time and effort to kind of learn and use it in some good ways. But look, it's not all rosy, right?
No, it's not all rosy.
You're on the board of WWF. We know there are a lot of environmental issues with the use of AI and the generation of AI. So what are some of the problems that you can see from a an ethical or environmental standpoint with AI, and how do we kind of temper our use, I guess, against those?
Well, the second part is harder, but the first bit is, they don't really come from a place of love. Okay. They come from a place of greed. That's where they were born, just like cars. And we know everybody listening to this podcast wouldn't be listening to this podcast if they didn't know that climate change is a real thing and it's really terrible. But nearly all of those people still drive an ICE car, an internal combustion engine vehicle. And they're not bad people for doing so. You have to get by in this current society. And I think AI is a bit like that. It's not great at all for so many different things, and I'm going to run through them. There's a lot. But it has this, but we're going to have to use it to keep our jobs, basically. I think pretty much every job, I'm actually working on an article about each and every different type of job in charities, whether they're vulnerable, at risk, extinct in the wild kind of thing, or will be if action isn't taken. But what are the negative things about it? Copyright and intellectual property. I train all my AIs on stuff that we have the intellectual rights to use in our training materials. Oceanic is a training organization, so that's what we're doing. But they and I try not to let it go out and find stuff on the internet. Two reasons. One is I don't want to steal other people's stuff. And the second thing is there's a lot of rubbish out there as well. So copyright and intellectual property is a real concern. There's a lot happening on that. That's just good. Data privacy and security. If you haven't got your settings and you put stuff in there, you're helping the LLMs learn, especially on free. Another reason a reason to pay is usually there are better security on that. I still wouldn't be uploading all my donor data into that unless it was a CRM grade AI, but generally I wouldn't be wanting to do that. But there are things like Dataro, for example, which should have the right security. So that's a worry, is just data privacy and security. I'm not worried, by the way, about things like board reports. It doesn't matter. They're not legally protected stuff, and it really doesn't matter if someone stole them. I don't want them to, but my rule of thumb is if you'd email it, you can put it in an AI, because AI is probably safer than your email. Transparency and trust, using AI in images and stories, things like that. Cultural sensitivity and bias. I'm sure everybody's heard about that. That sort of way that just churns out the same kind of people. Again, all of my AIs are trained on that kind of stuff. Vanilla content and creativity is really an interesting one. There's a lot of people talking about that, but it's like there is a formula for certain things, like the way that you construct something, like what a car looks like. Draw a car and it looks like this and has four wheels, and there's a reason it works. And to some extent, we are going to go to all cars have four wheels with many products, but we will still have outliers, and we will still be pushing things. But one of the reasons I don't like you going, give me some ideas for this, is because you're in edit mode. I'd much rather you discuss it with the AI and that you're driving that creativity as well. I don't like the idea of it. People were really worried that young people wouldn't be good when they're older at mental arithmetic if they use calculators. I'm a mathematician, that's my degree, but I'm really not really that good at mental arithmetic because I used a calculator. And it doesn't cause any problems. So people, they won't be good at stuff because they use AI. Well, they'll just use AI and we'll be doing more stuff. It's okay. I'm not too worried about that one. But the really big ones for me, energy and water use, huge, huge, huge. Now, there are these enormous data centers in Australia being built by Amazon, which are fully fully renewable. And so there's some really good stuff. But on balance, nuclear power is having to grow dramatically to keep up with the pace in places where no one really cares. The governments don't care by putting nuclear power there. There's just stuff that's happening there. But also on energy, lots of AIs are used to dramatically reduce waste of energy. But I reckon on balance, it's not in the Jedi camp. I think it's more the Sith are winning that one on using the Force. Then there's the ethics of these horrific businesses, right? It's not just the energy and all that lot. The human rights abuses are just, the people who are kind of like hired to look at every image and say things like, this is a dog leaning out of the window of a car in front of a sign. And then they're paid, really small amounts of money to see these images. And that's just for training cars how to drive safely, for example. So there's a lot of those stuff that are all pretty negative. And then there's all of the positive things, empowering people through AI, applying knowledge first, using AI-driven decision-making and accountability, building thinking capacity. So there's a lot of positive things around it, and these are things that need to go into our policies. But I reckon on balance, it's more in the Sith side, but unfortunately the Jedi have got to wield the Force as well to pull it back to the Jedi side.
Fantastic.
For young people or people who just aren't into science fiction or whatever, they are like, what is he talking about?
I think you're fairly safe there with all the spin-offs that are coming on, all the animated ones, Attack of the Clones, etc. Yeah. No, I think most youth are totally up to speed. So we're going to be talking in a future conversation about boards, and I'm wondering what role boards should be playing in this space in terms of, setting the right policy and guidance and leadership around this.
All right, well, my numbers aren't quite right here, but something like 95% of charities raise 5% or so of all the revenue. So that's pretty low, right? And I think that AI really, really helps those smaller charities be able to do, because nearly all charities could not afford a copywriter. So they just write their own stuff. But with the AI and with some training, they can actually really get much better copy. And it's actually really interesting because the small ones, their policies, they just get on with this stuff. Whereas a lot of the larger ones, they have these incredibly restrictive policies. As soon as someone's written a policy, there's one in place. So no one's really bothered about it. So it's so hard to get them changed. So if your organization's in the middle of writing a policy, interfere right now. Make sure it's actually asking the people who would be using the AI for their jobs before we ban everything except Copilot. Copilot is really safe, generally speaking, which is why people, and it's in our agreement, we've got charity discount and stuff. So Copilot is really good and safe, but it's not very good at lots of things. It is very good at lots of things, but there's a lot of things that other tools would be much better at. So people make the mistake of banning those other tools, and people just go and use them anyway and even pay for them themselves, which is not fair. And they're breaking that rule. So then blah, blah, blah. And then we even end up with people who are working 2 jobs because their efficiency is doubled and they just got 2 jobs and working from home. Yeah, cool. And that's not quite what you want to be doing with that. So there's a lot to talk about policy on AI, but we've got to get policy fast, encourage use, and support people.
Fantastic. Look, it's been really interesting talking to you. I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface. I'm sure there's lots more to deep dive into. Is there a book on AI that you could recommend people if they're, maybe just wanting a little bit more information about where it's all come from? Yes, I'm sorry. We can come back to it at the end of the
Yes, there's that great documentary, The Terminator. I think that's a really good place to start. A cracking book. And then there's Ender's Game as well. I think that's we can learn a lot about AI and pretty much all of the Star Treks, not the Star Warses. But I would recommend there's some awesome podcasts. And for me, because of the way AI is working, I've forgotten the name, but there is an awesome book by a woman going inside one of the big AI companies. But my favorite, I'm just looking on my phone now because I listen to. One of my favorites is the AI Daily Brief. It is daily. It's half an hour. I listen to it every day. When you first start listening, you go, what are they talking about? But then after 4 or 5 of these, you go, okay, you get this. And it's terrifying how much changes are happening. But that's one of my favorite things.
Fantastic. What was it called again? AI Daily.
The AI Daily Brief. With Daniel Whitemore.
Amazing. All righty. Thank you so much for being in the studio today, Sean. Always great talking to you.
Thank you.